Hi, I'm Jonathan McNair.
And I'm Rod McNair.
And this is Brother to Brother. Well, it's been a while since we've done one of these, so let's see if we can remember how. Again, this is a podcast about leadership, and leadership specifically within the church for those who are in official leadership roles, but also those who'd like to grow in leadership. We're talking about different concepts of leadership and how we apply it in the church. So today, my brother Rod had a topic, and sometimes I have to identify the voice because our voices sound very similar. So I will, if you're listening to this with audio, I'm going to identify that this is Jonathan, and I'm going to be speaking to my brother Rod, who will now explain the topic that you brought to the table.
Well, thank you. Yes, this is Rod, and it is good to be back in the saddle here. It's been a little while, but it's good to be back with all of you. We are just recording this just a short time before Atonement, and recently we got an email that was forwarded to me, and it was from someone who had seen the telecast that I gave on the Day of Atonement, about the Day of Atonement.
Not on the Day of Atonement.
No,
because
not
that's
on the Day of Atonement. That's right.
Okay.
Explaining the Day of Atonement.
Okay.
And this person said it was helpful. It was they learned a lot, but the thing they did not agree with was where I talked about how Christ represented one of the goats, the one slain, and the other represented Satan, the devil. And this person, who actually happened to be a former member of the Living Church of God, and at some point along the way has left us and then has absorbed the idea that both goats represent Jesus Christ, which is a common Protestant idea. It's, we find that in a lot of commentaries. But what struck me was, as I was reading this email and thinking about how to reply, because it's good to acknowledge people when they write in like that, was first of all how easily some of these ideas can trip us up if we're not careful. And it caused me to do a little bit more reading and a little digging, and what I found was, first of all, we have a number of sermons as well as articles on the topic, on the subject. The other thing is that this whole idea of Christ being both the goat that was slain, representing his death, and then the goat that was sent away alive, representing maybe our sins being taken away or his resurrection. This is not a new concept, and yet I think for people who get tripped up with it, it's sort of something that they feel like some in the church have learned new, and it's exciting. I found that Tertullian and Justin Martyr, who were both so-called church fathers back in the early centuries after the beginning of the church, both of them believed this and taught this. So it's like so many heresies, false doctrines that have not been a part of the Church of God historically, even in recent times, in the decades of under Mr. Armstrong, etc. And yet, from time to time, these things crop up and trip some people up who are maybe not as careful or a little bit too open to be looking at some of these things, which are frankly very, very deceptive ideas. And so I thought, well, this is a great time to talk a little bit about this topic, and maybe even more importantly, what we as leaders in a local congregation do with what happens when false doctrines, when heresies are coming around, and what do we do with them?
So as you're talking, I'm thinking, first, that it's important for leaders to be solid in doctrine. It would seem that this is the first thing, that it is not, leaders are not just about giving orders or even just organizing and administering. Leaders in the church, this is, if you're in a business or something, that's different. But within the church, it would seem that one of the most important things is to be doctrinally sound. And I think we could do a couple of scriptures that make that very clear. And then the other is how to deal with false doctrine. It is important that leaders do deal with heresy when it's introduced, and that's important as well. So that could be another thing we might talk about for a second. As you're talking, it reminds me of I'll say a concept that I've been thinking about, and that is that different groups that have, I'll say, come from part of the Church of God background, let's just say, broadly speaking, that have picked up false doctrines. They have picked up heretical ideas. Just call them what they are. Heretical ideas. It could be about, for example, sacred name. That's a popular one that seems to pop up. In fact, when you talk about these, some of these doctrines, these false ideas have been around for a while. When I was just, last year or so, I was working on a church history class for our students. And in reading Mr. Armstrong's autobiography, I realized, and I guess I'd just never seen that before, that he dealt with that, 80 years ago, 70 years ago, back in the early days of his ministry. That was an issue. And so the idea of the sacred name, and that you can only use that name when referring to God, and so on and so forth. So that's not a new one, but it is, I'll say, I have a phrase I think fits, and that is dead-end doctrines. They're doctrines that can be they really can be all-consuming to a person, so that they literally will get so fixated on it that, number one, it fills their mind, and secondarily, they actually are willing to turn their back on the truth, the work, etc., because they get so fixated on a particular doctrine. And so I say dead end because it takes them off in a dead end. And there are some organizations, honestly, that have become defined by, I want to say, dead end doctrines, sacred name, the calendar issues, and this issue as well. And there are others, but they're dead end doctrines because they take somebody away from the work and the truth. I think it'd be a good time to go ahead and read a couple of scriptures that speak to the importance of leaders in the church and doctrine.
Absolutely. So here's one in 2 Timothy chapter 2. In verse 1, Paul is writing to Timothy, "You therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. And the things that you have heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." And that's really a powerful concept here, that we teach what we have been taught. And again, as you say, we don't need to be someone who is standing up at the pulpit to be, in that sense, having a bit of a leading role or teaching role. Sometimes just mature, long-time members who have been around, and they are patiently continuing in the truth and listening and humbly accepting, the truth that we've been taught for decades. They've been taught for decades. Just by their example, they are helping to in one sense, teach others who are newer or younger that you don't have to go after every crazy idea. You really do have to think, what was I taught? How did I first learn the truth? What was the mechanism? Who did God work through? What organization did God work through? And that's a big deal.
It reminds me of the fact that as a minister, as an elder, as a pastor, when there are people within the congregation who are solid doctrinally, it holds you as an elder, as a pastor, it holds you to account because I'll speak for myself. Yeah. When I know there are people in the audience who have been holding fast to the truth longer than I've been alive, it actually really encourages me to make sure that what I'm saying is accurate and not veering off into my own ideas, right, or into twigs or into little areas that don't have solid support. Yeah. I think that solid, doctrinally sound members can help encourage a leader to be doctrinally sound. Yeah. But still, for the leader to be doctrinally sound is really important because there's an outsized influence. Mm-hmm. When a leader, someone in a leadership role in the congregation is speaking and is teaching and is explaining. There's one in 1 Timothy 4 as well. Paul was, again, still writing to Timothy. In this case, he says, this is 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 6. If you instruct the brethren in these things, you will be a good minister of Jesus Christ, nourished in the words of faith and of the good doctrine which you have carefully followed. But reject profane and old wives' fables and exercise yourself toward godliness. So there's this emphasis, and even when he says, let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers in word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, in purity, till I come, give attention to reading, to exhortation, to doctrine. So doctrine is really important, according to Paul, in holding Timothy to a high standard that would help him to do a good job as a leader within the church.
It really is, and I think as you're saying here, if we have a role of influence, we have an outsized leverage, let's say, and we have to be careful. If others look up to us, to whatever degree, as an example, it matters. I'm looking at Hebrews chapter 12. And this says, he's talking about in verse 14, looking carefully lest anyone fall short of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up cause trouble, and by this many become defiled. Now, that's a slightly different topic of being bitter, being offended, that sort of thing. But I think the same principle applies, that if we allow ourselves to go astray, to go off track, we're not an island. No one is an island. We all have people we influence. We all have people who look at us, and maybe not necessarily, every last thing that we say or do, they would necessarily follow every last thing. But we might shake their faith. Mm-hmm. We might shake their commitment. We might cause them to stumble. And that's a pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm. As a pastor in teaching congregations, I've always thought, and I don't know where I heard this, but I imagine it was somebody who was a mentor to me, but I've always thought that it's good as a pastor in giving sermons to roughly divide into three parts the categories of sermons: doctrine, Christian living, and prophecy. Now, I'm not saying it has to be exactly along those lines, mm-hmm. but I think if a pastor can be able to at least categorize his sermons as one of those three, mm-hmm. when he gives a sermon and you're recording your sermons, it helped me to look back over the time and see, okay, am I spending all my time in Christian living? Because, maybe I like to, I like to give stories, and I like to talk in stories, and I like to bring principles to life, which is all well and good. But looking back over time, if you're not spending a good chunk of your time reviewing doctrines and teaching doctrine and also prophecy, mm-hmm. then you're really not providing a balanced diet for your congregation. So doctrine is important. The teaching of doctrine, the knowledge and willingness to be a sound source of true doctrine is important.
Absolutely. It matters. Doctrine matters. I think going back to worldwide days, those of us who were there, it's interesting that error is always couched in, this is new.
Mm-hmm.
This is something you've not heard before. This is new truth.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were talking about a moment ago, some of these issues that Mr. Armstrong wrestled with early in his ministry, some of the things that we can see were taught by the early so-called church fathers. I remember the leadership of Worldwide Church of God, when it was going astray, introducing ideas, just Protestant mainstream Christian ideas, as if it was new, as if these were things they were learning, and because they were really finally digging into the Bible. And those who were actually reading their Bible and had come out of, let's say, other churches, or maybe not come out of other churches, but recognize what they taught, they recognize this is nothing new. This is just, it's old stuff that is just rehashed. And I guess, isn't it ironic even that in terms of the topic we're talking about, is talking about Satan as a deceiver.
Mm-hmm.
And how the Day of Atonement, part of the Day of Atonement, is specifically geared to unmask Satan as in his role as being the deceiver. And yet one of his deceptions is to get people, mainstream Christians, to not recognize that he is a deceiver.
Mm-hmm.
And even some of our people who have gotten tripped up by that through this doctrine, and how important it is for us to hold fast to the truth and be a part of the bulwark that is supporting the truth in the church.
So let me ask you this. What are some of the ways that, I'll say, true doctrine is undermined or attacked? So one is this strategy of promoting something as new truth, which, as we said, I don't know, I've just found inevitably anything that I've heard as something that new, if you look hard enough, you'll see it's not new at all. So that's one. That's one. There's another one I think of, and that is the straw man technique. I'm thinking back to when false doctrine was introduced in Worldwide. So here's how it goes. Mr. Armstrong was not right in every way. Well, you're going to have, what do? You have to say, or you might call it the vacuum cleaner salesman, argument. You get the vacuum cleaner salesman gets you going along. You don't want to have dirty carpets, do you?
Oh, of course not.
Well, so you're already going down that road, right? And this is what was said. I can't tell you how many times I heard it. Well, Mr. Armstrong wasn't right in every way about everything, right?
Yeah.
Well, you have to say, of course, because nobody's perfect.
Right.
So the next step was, and then it would say, there's an area he didn't really know that much about. He didn't know everything. So what happens is they set up the straw man that you start beating with a stick. Mm-hmm. And then in this sense, it was Mr. Armstrong and his teaching. And then they would use it to introduce something else. Mm-hmm. And, the listener's already agreeing. And that it's a psychological technique. Those are two that I can think of. What you think of any?
Well, I can think of another one where, I read a little while ago about being careful to teach what you've been taught. I've heard this reasoning. Well, if you go down that line, we're just becoming like the Catholic Church,
not willing to change,
and blindly following whatever we're taught. And maybe that's similar to what you're saying. It's sort of a straw man, as if following teachers is blindly following them like the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
There's no comparison at all.
No.
In fact, when sometimes some can get tripped up by the concept of proving all things, as if we have to go dumpster diving.
Yeah.
As if we have to go through trash, literally, as if we're, imagine the typical dumpster, and that you gotta sift through all of that garbage. Why? Because who knows? Maybe there's something valuable there.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what proving all things means.
Yeah.
God is not telling us that we have to fill our minds with every form of garbage to evaluate it. Can you imagine how much time wasted that would be, and how much polluted we would become just by doing that? So it clearly does not mean listen to everything you hear.
Yeah. Have you ever felt like you're being manipulated right from the get-go when somebody says in a letter or in an argument who wants to promote and demand that you accept their idea, and I'll say false idea, but they want you to accept it, and so what they'll say is, and it leads out like this: true ministers of God are willing to actually change if they are proven wrong. I'm going to show you something, and this is the truth.
Yeah.
Now the logical conclusion is
you've been proven wrong.
Exactly.
And so are you willing to change?
Exactly. And so immediately your setup is having to change to agree with them to be a true minister of God.
Right.
And it's like a psychological trick.
Right.
Oh man, I hate that when that happens because it's so transparent.
Right.
They are so convicted of their little heretical idea.
Right.
If you don't go along with them, then you're unwilling to change, and that's not it at all.
Right.
The idea is not true. Another one is the academic angle. So in other words, it's the idea trying to prove through a complicated, I'll say, academic argument about maybe a nuance of a word or something like that, as opposed to really the preponderance of scriptures that actually support what we teach. And so it'll be a nitpicky thing. That's another, I'll say, enemy to true doctrine. And that is our topic. We're saying here, look, and as a leader, we have to value the truth. Doctrine is important as a leader. We're not just administrators. Somebody who's fulfilling a leadership role. Right. And obviously we say even as influence, that's leadership. Right. But doctrine is what we're about. In fact, it's a defining characteristic. I'm not just going to say of the living church of God, of the church of God. Right. It says the church is the pillar and ground of the truth. Right. That's what Paul told Timothy as well. It's the pillar and ground of the truth. So the truth should be important to us.
It sanctifies us. It sets us apart. Why would Jesus say that unless truth, meaning not just any information, but true things that God has said? I mean, he talks about how his word is living, and it sets us apart. And so you're right; it's extremely, extremely important.
So the title we'll put on this will be something like, we have to work on this, but the title will be something like Leaders and Truth. How's that sound?
That sounds good.
Leaders and Truth.
I like it.
Oh, Leaders and True Doctrine, because we want to include the doctrine part of that, right? Leaders and true doctrine, or maybe just leaders and doctrine, and this explanation of it being the truth will be important in that. So.
Right.
This is a brainstorming part of the session.
Thanks for joining us as we brainstorm the title.
We'll get back to you when we get this all figured out. But in the introduction you mentioned not only the importance of doctrine, but also what to do when false doctrine is being introduced. So why don't you speak to that for a moment?
Well, essentially, we have a responsibility to defend the truth. And so we as individuals, now maybe every last person is not, as we've said, is not the one standing up and teaching everyone else. But we certainly have the responsibility of if someone around us is bringing false doctrine, we, especially if we're in a leadership role, we have the responsibility of not just being quiet and ignoring it, or certainly accepting it, but addressing it.
Sure.
And saying, wait a minute, that's I'm not sure that you're right on that. Let's talk about, what does the church teach? What does the Bible teach?
Which actually means that recognizing falsehood, recognizing heresy versus the truth, the doctrines or teachings of the Bible, recognizing it is important. So if all of us, particularly as leaders, if our job is to protect and defend, we have to be able to recognize danger.
Right.
But that would really apply to every single member, honestly, of the church, of the body, to recognize danger. You think about it, if our bodies come into contact with a poison or with something that's dangerous, no matter where it touches the body, it hurts. It has an impact. And so, but particularly as leaders, so I would think that recognizing it is important, which means we need to be studying our Bibles.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be really carefully studying the instruction and teaching that we're getting locally or from the church, from headquarters, from our magazines, etc. So we need to be thoroughly versed in the truth. And then the next step is how do we address it? And I think it's different for a member versus, I'll say, an elder, but
Sure.
It doesn't mean a member can't, who doesn't have the authority to ask the person to leave necessarily.
Right.
But it doesn't mean a member can't say, hold on a second, I don't think that what you're saying is accurate.
Right.
I can show you, or it might be good for you to speak to Mr. Jones about that, the elder,
Right.
because what you're saying, and I'm really not interested in going down this road, because this is not accurate. This is not what the Bible teaches, and so you need to speak to the elder about that. But I'm not going to be buying what you're selling.
Right.
And I think you should.
Right. And frankly, I mean, you can say, well, that's confrontational, but I mean, that's actually going to your brother. That's being upfront with, if our brother was, involved in a sin that is just going to destroy them,
or bring it into the congregation. If they had a rattlesnake and they're bringing it into the middle of the group,
right.
You'd
want to try to help them. And like you were talking about a poison that is afflicting a body. Well, I mean, Christ talks about wolves in sheep's clothing,
mm-hmm.
and so we have to understand that some. Not that say a person who is starting to question or necessarily they're a wolf. Maybe they're listening to a wolf.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're too open to listening to false doctrines, and a friend can actually, as you said, pull them aside and say, hey, that doesn't sound accurate, and you really need to talk to somebody, or, look at our booklet. I read about that last week, mm-hmm. and that's not what it says. That's not what the Bible says. But recognizing that there really is a spiritual warfare going on, mm-hmm. and that there really is an adversary. And again, ironically, the whole topic is talking about our adversary, right. and being able to recognize him.
Yeah.
And yet he wants to be kind of shrouded in mystery and behind the scenes. We have to recognize that there are ideas that come from wolves, mm-hmm. not sheep.
And, we do value, in the Living Church of God, we value truth and doctrine. And the reason I say that is because there are some organizations that are much more big tent, mm-hmm. and will be willing to accept a variety of angles on a particular doctrine, and the approach is that, well, as long as we just believe the Sabbath together or the holy days,
right,
these things they really don't matter. But we do value. We it does matter. Doctrine is actually, in fact, this is one of the things that we've from the beginning, Mr. Meredith emphasized, and that is that it's not about people. It's not about who gives which even organization or COG group or whatever has the most charismatic leader or leaders or whatever else. It's not about following somebody, and it's not about men. Ultimately, doctrine and where the truth is very important, and we value that. We hold that dear. So doctrine should be part of a leader's mind. It should be something that's on their mind, and they value, they cherish, and they're willing to defend.
Yeah.
So that's right.
As someone years ago said, there are 3 reasons why they came out of worldwide and then came into Global Church of God as it was at that time. Number 1, doctrine. Number 2, doctrine. And number 3, doctrine.
There you go.
So, I mean, that's what we teach, and what we're being taught.
And even we would say, well, what about the work? But the work is doctrine, because
that's right. It's
the doctrine, the scriptures actually emphasize the importance of doing the work. So that actually, doing the work is a doctrinal issue. It is a teaching.
Right.
Church government, that is a doctrinal teaching. It's not just an administrative issue. It is a doctrinal teaching that is reflected in the Bible. So that's important. So is it time for the quiz now? Do I get to quiz you, or you get to quiz me, or we get to quiz the audience?
I think we should quiz the audience.
We ought to put up a pop quiz that pops up right about this point for our audience.
That'd be great. Yeah.
How could we find out who gets the highest score, though? I think that would be.
It's all anonymous. So.
And it's on the honor system, I suppose. They will know.
Unless we would have them sign it, and then we could post all the responses.
Oh, I like that.
That would be fun.
I like that. I like that you think. I like that. Well, do you have any other comments to add before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, so just closing the loop here on this issue. Again, it was a question about the Day of Atonement and the meaning of the 2 goats. And and as we are in those days of the fall feast days, this season, it's just interesting how some of these, what you might think is just that's just a picky point. It's a semantic, argument. And yet the identification of the second goat is so important. I'm just reading here in Revelation chapter 20 and talking about verse 1, how then he says, I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. Isn't it interesting how the Day of Atonement, one of the central focuses when we look at history and we look at the events, the chronological events that are going to happen just ahead of us with Christ's return, and then Satan being bound right here, and then leading up right into the millennium, and the Day of Atonement is right between the Feast of Trumpets and the Feast of Tabernacles, and it's staring us in the face.
Yeah.
And yet, how easily, if we're not careful, we can go down a dead-end doctrine. Yeah. And so it's just a warning for all of us, isn't it?
Well, and I think you'd mentioned before, but you've got a couple of them, I think, in here on the table. But if anybody wants to dig into this doctrine, understanding this, how again in recent years this has been raised by some, that the 2 goats on the Day of Atonement, that one was sacrificed and one was led out into the wilderness, and the one that was sacrificed symbolizes Christ and his sacrifice. The one that was led out into the wilderness symbolizes Satan. And this idea is that they both symbolize Christ.
Right.
And our articles on that topic, they plainly explain that.
Yeah, exactly. There's one right here from Mr. Nathan, A Tale of Two Goats, September-October 2019. It's in the LCN. And you can go to members.lcg.org and you type in atonement, and you'll find that. You'll also find a sermon Mr. Weston gave several years ago. It was about the goats as well. I think it might have the same title. So you're right. It's been addressed, and it's very helpful to review these things,
especially this time of year. And in fact, it helps to clarify it. Have you ever noticed that a doctrine, when it's taught truthfully, it clarifies?
Right.
Same thing with Passover, for example. One of the things that happened at Worldwide as they were turning their back on truth was they began to introduce other terms apart from Passover,
right,
communion, Eucharist, and so on and so forth, which actually blur the clear meaning of the Passover, tying Christ's sacrifice in the New Testament, obviously, to the Old Testament observance, and it's such clear, helpful understanding, very clear, and by blurring it, it actually begins to separate it from some of the meaning of the days, whether it be Passover or whether it be the Day of Atonement. So there's certainly, we have plenty written about it that can help to explain it if anybody wants to study further, which would be a good thing, which would be a good idea.
And again, that's on members.lcg.org, and just type in the search bar atonement or two goats, and a number of articles, references, sermons will come up.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for your time. And
thank you. This has been fun again. Let's do it again sometime.
Let's do it again. Let's not wait quite so long.
That's right.
Thanks for being with us here today. I am Jonathan McNair.
And I'm Rod McNair.
And this has been Brother to Brother. Take care. Have a good fall feast day season.
Bye-bye.